You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. I'm your host, Saul Muerte, back again to dissect and discuss another John Carpenter classic as we're dedicating our love to this horror auteur in our recent season. And we've been churning through them a fair bit. You know, we hope you've been kind of listening to them. We have been delving more towards the middle years of late. And we're coming now to what is the last feature he would do in the 1980s, 1988, in something that became a massive, massive cult classic called They Live. And we're going to be talking about this one. And those that aren't familiar with our language and what we do here, we tend to dissect and discuss the plot narrative. But the key thing that we ask ourselves, because a lot of these things we look at things with nostalgia, sunglasses on, from our experiences of when we first watched them. So we have a quick chat about when that was, our earliest memories of it, before we dissect, as I said, and go through the plot narrative. And when we come out the other side, we ask that more important question is, does it still stand strong today? And would you recommend it to a modern film-going audience? So in order to do that, I need to have one of my key surgeons alongside me, and I'm thrilled to welcome aboard, joining me in this episode, Miles Davies. Welcome aboard, Miles.
Hello, glad to be aboard.
Look, it's a good one to talk to with this. As I said, look, it established a huge cult following, and I was just having a quick look from the budget side of things. So it was made for like $3 million, and according to this is on Wikipedia, but according to Wikipedia, it made a box office taking of $13 million. So it definitely got a profit. I do wonder how much there has been outside the box office, because for me, this is one of those movies that definitely would have gotten word of mouth and become bigger on the home entertainment scene.
I think so. I don't remember it getting a cinema release in Australia. I was in Australia when this came out.
Okay.
I only ever remember it coming out on video because I worked in a video store at the time.
Sure.
And so I think we had 2 copies and they were always out.
Right.
They were just constantly out, and people were renting them, and people were telling each other about them as well. So
yeah. So I'm having a quick scroll down here. I can't see anything information-wise around the popularity of it on home entertainment. But I did see recently there's just been a 4K release from Shout Factory, I want to say, that's just coming out or just been released as at the time of this record, and it's coming along with a figure with Keith David's character from the movie as well. So it's a bit of a I guess a way of kind of pulling people in, as like there is something a little bit different in the fact that it's got this figure of his character in the film. So it's quite timely, shall I say, that we're talking about this now. I think we'll talk about our earlier experiences of it as well. But I think one of the key things that made this become so popular was obviously the casting of Roddy Piper as John Nada, because this kind of came about when Carpenter went to watch WrestleMania 3. So this was the point where Piper was at his peak.
Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Yeah, and it was he was a bit of a bad guy on the wrestling scene.
Yeah,
but a lovable rogue kind of partly. Like people love to hate him kind of thing, you know. So, so it was interesting, like, to tap into that, and I don't know how much that was a deliberate part on Carpenter to cast somebody like Piper in the lead role. Because stuff I've read or watched around it has been more to do with the fact that he saw Piper as this everyday kind of guy who could just get the job done, sort of thing, you know. So
I'm sure there's an element of business involved as well.
Yeah,
you've massive draw card because WWF at the time was rising up.
That's right.
Thanks to Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper and all those guys.
Yeah, that's it.
They were starting to get noticed, obviously, and they were starting to draw massive crowds through the WrestleMania, and even on the VHS market, home video market, the WrestleManias were just renting through the roof, and they were going for an absolute fortune as well. So I can imagine if he went to go and get funding for this from a studio, and they said, "Oh, look, I've got this massive wrestling star involved." I mean, essentially, the wrestling stars, everybody knows they're actors anyway. They're like, athletic actors. I mean, that's why you've got, your John Cena's and your Rocks and all of these other guys who've come since then.
Hell yeah.
I think he may have been probably one of the first to actually crossed over from wrestling into mainstream acting.
Yeah.
And so it sort of paved the way for The Rock and all of these guys. But, you can see why there's a natural progression for these guys to do that type of thing, especially considering how physical the role of this particular movie was as well.
Yeah, and look, one of the things that listeners may or may not be used to, we sometimes don't stick to like the linear narrative, and we may jump in and out and around about. So, but there is one kind of particular scene in this movie that the film is famous for. Is its 5.5 minute fight sequence between Piper and David. Which was incredibly well choreographed. There's the guy that choreographed it is a guy called Jeff Amada, who he's been. If you look up his credentials, he's been kind of like a stunt coordinator in numerous films, and he did work on Big Trouble in Little China prior to this, so Carpenter had experience working with him, and he was quite influential in the way that this fight sequence came together. And when you watch the behind the scenes stuff, it was because Keith David isn't known for his kind of he's a very well built guy, but he wasn't known for his athleticism. And in this movie, him and Piper just kind of really went for it. Really, And you can see that, and you can see like the outtakes, and that moment really bonded them as friends, and they were kind of good pals afterwards as well. Just kind of, and I guess when you're working quite grueling about something that's physically demanding like that, it's going to bring together the camaraderie anyway. So it was an interesting thing, but I more wanted to make a note of Jeff Amada's kind of role with that, because he was, as I said, influential coming up to the stunt coordination, and he ended up doing a lot of the stunt work in this movie for the. Now they're called ghouls, I think, in this. I'm just trying to quickly have a check on that I'm correct in calling them that while I'm scrolling through.
Yeah, I noticed in the credits they were calling him ghouls.
Yeah, and he ended up being like the main. What should I say? He's like the main kind of stunt guy for the ghouls in this. And you can see it in you've got shots of these like cops, for example, and then that are kind of trying to arrest Piper's character Nada, and then it will cut to with him with the sunglasses on, and everything you see him with the sunglasses on, the ghouls and stuff, is predominantly Jeff Amada playing those roles. So it was kind of, and I remember watching one of the extras, and from Amada's position, he was talking about it, and he's like, I think he was just on the set kind of helping with stuff, and then Carpenter was like, we need somebody of a different kind of stature to kind of represent these people, and he just scanned the room and he pointed out Amada, went, someone like that guy, which is how he ended up kind of donning the stuff. So so it's kind of a cool way to get involved more so in the scenes. So look, okay. So before we dissect and discuss this, like you were talking about working in the video store. Was that the first time you became aware of the movie then? And is that during that period when you first watched it?
Essentially, it had the shittiest video cover I've ever seen on a video. So I wasn't initially drawn to it, to be honest. But then I think that was just the Australian release, maybe. Everybody just kept talking about it, and I was aware of John Carpenter, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'll give it a go. And I rewatched it today, and today was the second time I've ever watched it.
Oh.
The first time I ever watched it was probably around 89.
Okay.
And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it since, but I remembered every single bit about it. watching it back today, I was like, I remember this bit. I remember this bit. I remember this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I can't. Like, I really I must have watched a lot of these things in a foggy state of mind, because I distinctly remember pockets of the film, and so when I remember rewatching it, maybe it was about 10 years or so ago now, again. And so a lot of it was kind of, I think it was when I was going through my kind of Carpenter kind of phase again, like rewatching a load of his stuff, which is part of the reason why we're doing this podcast and dedicating it to his work. And I really kind of, I remember kind of distinctly enjoying it. But I think weirdly this time around, so I must have watched it maybe 3 times now then. And this time around when I watched it ahead of the podcast, I got to the end of it, and it was one of those, and this is rare for me, but I wanted to put it straight back on and play again. Because
it leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I was just like, I could just watch it all over again. I loved it so much, and I know I'm tipping my hat. I don't normally say that early on, but I just really enjoyed it this time round, and I just wanted to go back into it. One of the things I love more so around this time round was the atmosphere that's created in the film. And a lot of that is due to the music and the score in it, which is a massive nod to the Westerns. And
it's got a driving bass line,
It's beautiful. And it just, and it's got Nada's character has that signature theme tune as he's walking through this kind of downtown, desolate LA, dystopian kind of view of our world. And it reminded me of like the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone, where there was always music that was attached to, like Clint Eastwood's character or
they really was as a western for this. It really was.
Yeah, you could see it. It breathed it, and it's 100%. And this is coming from someone that I hand on my head, kind of. I'm not massively keen on westerns, which I know a lot of people are, but there are some that really resonated with me. And one of those movies were the original, spaghetti western Sergio Leone films. I absolutely adored those films. And there's a couple of others, like I love Butch Cassidy, for example, and things like that. So, but yeah, the whole spaghetti western thing is something that I just could eat that up. And it's a deliberate nod. Like, it's clear that Carpenter's taking a deliberate nod to those films, and that made me just kind of really sit with the film and just go, I'm digging this. This is Nada. Like, the name Nada means nothing, right? And it's how close can you get to insinuating that this is a massive nod to Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name? Than having a guy called Nada, it's like, and I know I'm oozing kind of wankdom here about kind of like nods to other films and like how maybe that's a bit cliche that other filmmakers do that, but this is one time that like I said, it just sat really nicely with me, and it gave me the feels, and exactly why when it got to the end I was like, I could just watch that all over again quite easily. Really, really cool. So, all right. So that, as I said, that's probably tipping my hat to where I sit with this, and probably when we come to recommending it. But let's start looking at what this film was about, because it's in a sense it's something that has become even more. What am I trying to say? It's current in our recent history, and with everything that's going on politically speaking, has become more relevant than ever before. And
absolutely.
And maybe this is why for me it feels like it's getting a bit of a resurgence because of that. And if it hasn't, it should.
I was watching it today, and I was just going, oh my God, this is like the whole Black Lives Matter thing and how it's being attacked by the police them by the government, and how it's the whole thing is so. It's almost like they watched the movie and they went, "This is how we're going to shut this shit down."
yeah, yeah. That's right.
Bizarre.
Yeah,
And it's, like you said, it's so relevant to what's happening now.
it's so relevant, and it's like, and I think, like I'm gonna, I normally talk about this at the end, but I'm obviously clearly championing it. But I think this is fast becoming one of those movies that, if you haven't seen it, you probably should see it. It's a science fiction action horror film, and it's based actually on a short kind of comic story called 8 o'clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. And Carpenter, pretty much, if you read the comic, Carpenter's obviously fleshed it out a lot more than what's there, but everything that's in that comic is pretty much in this movie.
Yeah.
So he didn't kind of shy away from it, and the concept of it is like this everyday guy who then suddenly, and this might sound, maybe this is what maybe turned people off, because the premise of it is a bit gimmicky in the sense that Nardo is only aware that there's this underworld that's in front of us, like it's smack bang in front of us, but everything's subliminal and we can't actually see what's going on, unless you put on these special sunglasses. And I think that bit makes you just go, what, really? Because it feels a bit Twilight Zone episode, like it's this kind of one little thing. But I think once you get past that, everything else just sits into place. It's just it's a method for him to kind of lift the veil, or to coin Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain is the things that are operating the world. So once you get through that, so basically once he does that, he realizes that there's this kind of ruling class of aliens that have been concealing their appearance, and they're manipulating people with these messages, like boards and stuff that are all over the place, like obey, consume,
marry, use.
Yeah, exactly. Like the core things that humans do, and to manipulate them essentially and have them under their control. So that's what the film is about. And he then, in doing so, suddenly becomes caught up in that underworld movement of people that are aware of this and are trying to cause an uprising and turn against these creatures. But so let's kind of look at how this is played out as the narrative, though, because we have we're first introduced to Piper's character, George Nardo, and he's like a homeless guy. He's a labourer, so he's used to physical work, and he's lost his job. I want to say somewhere like Georgia, but I could be wrong. But now I'm saying that out loud. Anyway, it's another place. Oh, Detroit. I want to say it's Detroit, actually. And he has been roaming America since, just to try and get work, and he's ended up in LA. And we're treated to a world that's in decline. This is one of the first movies that I can recall that really showed the poor and middle class in comparison to the social elite and upper class quite brazenly, and the gulf that there is between one and the other. And so we're kind of greeted that as he kind of roaming along, and he comes across this kind of street preacher, like blind preacher, who is kind of spouting this message and warning people that there's something not right with the world. And it can be one of those things that's easily dismissed,
It's this classic trope of ancient Greek theatre and ancient Roman theatre is Tiresias, the blind seer of Thebes. He's the prophetic guy who's blind. He's always blind.
Yes,
but it always is the voice of reason and tells you almost exactly what's going to happen. There's a tragedy about to happen, and this is why. Which essentially, spoiler alert. It actually is a tragedy.
Yeah, definitely is. Definitely is.
It's got the full, the next level sort of gravitas of ancient Greek theatre, basically. So
Yeah, and that's essentially what it is. Like, so he's our narrator at the beginning, who's foretelling the truth of what there is. It's just, and what's interesting about Nada's character is that he actually stops and listens to this guy, whereas a lot of people, like you, I think the other extras that you're seeing walking around are just brazenly walking past him and not really taking a no pun intended blind bit of notice to this guy. But Nada stopped him, and in that one moment, it tells you everything you need to know about him, that he's an observer, and he takes in everything, and because of that, that will lead him on the path of discovery of what actually is going on around him.
It's the precursor to his call to adventure, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
It's a Campbell sort of way.
That's it. So we then kind of follow him. He turns up at an employment agency, doesn't he? And he's like he's basically just saying, I'm looking for work. And the woman's just really dismissive and not really paying him much attention at all. But eventually he kind of ends up on a construction site. And this is where he meets Frank Armitage, played by Keith David. And the two, like, he's a little bit like Armitage is a little bit suspicious of Nada at first. There's a bit of kind of, he's trying to size him up. He's not really too sure, but he's still quite friendly with him. And he's, he kind of says, there's a place, if you're looking for somewhere to put your head down, this place I know. And Nada's just a bit, he just doesn't, it's almost like he's coming across as like he doesn't really give a shit about that either. But then he ends up following Armitage along, and to the point where Armitage is like, what the fuck? Why are you following me? And he's just like,
I think
there's
quite
this
a bit of first and trying to be the lone wolf type thing, and then I never accept charity or people's help, but I will reluctantly.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly right. So they end up at this. It's almost like a campsite, isn't it? Really, like what like you would look at it and think it's like a refugee site,
like a shanty town.
Yeah, shanty town. That's right. Yeah. And so he holes up there, and there's obviously some people that run the place. There's the guy that's an American dude who was in, and I've forgotten his name now off the top of my head, but he was in Prince of Darkness as well.
Oh, okay.
And he's the guy that seems to be running the camp, essentially, like, organizing stuff. And it's like there's soup, like a soup kitchen thing kind of laid up. And you get a few people talking on and off there. There's a TV set playing, and there's a point where it breaks up in the signal of what they're watching, and you get this message being spouted out, and it looks like, again, he's one of these kind of guys. He's basically, again, talking about this movement. Don't believe what you see, and I want to say at this point, this is where Nada, Piper's character, looks off in the distance and he sees the Reverend character who's almost mouthing it off. Am I jumping ahead, or is that?
Yeah. I think it's the next day when he sees it pop up again, and then it gets disrupted.
That's right.
And running off, and that's when he kind of notices big time that there's something sussed.
Yes.
I was interested in the whole fact that they laid out the groundwork of all these guys that started getting headaches.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah.
So clearly, like, it was disrupting some kind of cerebral brainwave thing going on that was, going from really comfortable, just coasting through their lives, asleep, suddenly they're awake, and it's it's really annoying. And so it's slightly painful, which is essentially what life is all about, isn't it? So
yeah, when you wake up to the truth, it's hard to accept the truth, and this is something that becomes a common theme with this, even with when the sunglasses bit comes up. It's hard for them to wear them for too long, because their brains become distorted to it, and they get these headaches even then. And I think Nada even says it's almost like a drug or something.
No, yeah, he says it's like they're on a drug and then with a massive come down.
That's right.
So yeah, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. So and there's while they're staying at this place, there's like they notice Nada notices there's a small church across the street. There's a lot of police helicopters that keep kind of flying over and hovering over the church and then flying off again. This is where Nada then kind of he wants to know a bit more about what's going on, so he goes into the church to kind of investigate what's going on because he's like, why are these people coming in and out? And when he walks in, like, there's just like this loud kind of speaker playing just the choir practice that's going on with like a recording, like with this kind of machinery. And and then he stumbles across a back room and there's cardboard boxes stacked everywhere. He's like, what's going on? Like, and he stumbles across a secret compartment with a load of these boxes inside as well. And he can hear the leader of the group in the background, Peter Jason, that's the guy's name, who's something like American dude. And he's kind of like the leader of the group, and he's kind of aware that the new guy Nada might be onto them, but he's also semi-aware like this, that they might be kind of being found out because the helicopter presence is becoming a lot more noticeable. And this is when the street preacher guy, the blind guy, suddenly stumbles in and he finds Nada and he starts probing Nada's face with his hands. Which you kind of think is because he's blind, which is true, but it's also in this moment Nada's he's trying to suss out if Nada's one of them or not. Which I thought was quite a nice kind of double way of playing it. And he kind of notices that Nada's got rough hands, for example, so he's used to physical labor, and then he kind of lets Nada go. Then we get the evening kind of comes. And this is where all of a sudden this huge, large police force presence arrives. And this is what we were talking about with the Black Lives Matter movement and the peaceful process. And this huge kind of military force comes in. And it's crazy. Like I reckon maybe Carpenter spent most of the budget on this one particular scene because there's lots going on. There's like lots of people moving, going around. Police, helicopters flying around above. As well, and it's basically kind of like they're just kind of looting through and just trying to find the culprits of the movement. This is why the police force have come in.
But it's so fun watching it as well, especially now with the relevance of Black Lives Matter, the protests, and how the police so heavily handed charge through with a digger. They dug up and waves of these riot shielded police. But it was exactly like what it was like. Holy shit! This is like last week on CNN.
Yeah, it really was. It was really full on, really intense, and for us watching it now, that's what reminds us. It reminds us of the stuff we're watching on the news at the moment. And bear in mind that this is 1988, so we're going back a fair way. What's that?
This 12? Is 1988 in an alien world, by the way.
Yeah, true. That's
1988.
True.
Because it happened back then, it was like this was like a dystopian future in 1988.
Yeah, that's right. Now, and a lot of these, and that's the thing. A lot of these things are becoming like really, stuff that was kind of predicted back then is starting to really kind of become quite. And I'm noticing a lot of these articles lately. Good. Yeah, and just like, why are all these things coming true? RoboCop was the other. Not that we've got a robot cop going around, but like the other elements of it has also become really apparently quite true as well. So it's pretty scary stuff. So this is kind of going on, and they start kind of coming in with, like you said, the bulldozers. They're beating people up. They grab the blind minister and beat him to death, essentially. And one of the other guys as well has been kind of rounded up, and he's being beaten up. And Nada, in the meantime, and Frank are trying to get out of there and flee and just kind of save themselves, essentially. We then end up cutting to the next day, and this is where Nada then returns back to the scene, and he goes back to the church, and he can see it's been emptied out. but he then comes across the secret compartment again, and he finds one of the boxes, and he grabs one of them, runs into an alleyway, thinking there's something like of worth in there. And obviously, when he opens it up, it's just a load of cheap-looking sunglasses. And he's just like, oh, well, that was a waste. And so I think he picks up the box and he just dumps it. So he hides it somewhere. I can't remember where. He hides it somewhere.
The dumbass hides it in a bin.
It's in a bin, that's right. I was like, where did he put it?
That shit's going to get taken away.
Of course.
You moron.
Yeah. But he... yeah. But he ends up putting one of these sunglasses on, and he's just kind of mindfully walking along. And then he's staring down as he walks. And then we get like this kind of viewpoint, which so every time he's got the sunglasses on, it's always like this black and white kind of footage, essentially, that he sees. And he's walking on the sidewalk. And then it's when he looks up, everything's like in this shade of grey. And he kind of takes it off and he's like, what's going on? That's a bit weird. Puts them back on again. And that's where we get the first moment where he looks up and he sees one of those billboards with the words "Obey" written on it. And then he takes his sunglasses down. And I think it's some billboard about the Caribbean or inviting people to the Caribbean from memory.
Yeah, it says Marry and Reproduce on the
That's
Caribbean.
It. That's the one, yeah. So there's a woman lying on the beach, marry and reproduce.
This whole scene has been replicated so many times since.
Oh, yeah.
Simpsons, in American Dad. And,
yeah.
What else is there? Family Guy uses every animation as
pretty much.
As a satire of what things are. But yeah, it's hilarious. This sort of obscure little sci-fi movie. It just has such a resonating effect on so many other artists.
Well, that's the thing. Like even like with the Trump when Trump came into power as a president, there was a nod to this was taken by, I can't remember, it was an artist with one of the poster boards was put up with Trump, but with him with the ghoul face from They Live.
Yeah,
put up as well. So
Obey. I think it might have been because Shepard Fairey did the Obama ones, the Hope. So I think he might have...
Yeah, because it is very similar to that. You're right, with the visual style that they play in it. So you're probably right.
Yeah, so he's obviously rejigged it to...
Yeah. So... Sorry, Miles, you were going to say something.
No, that's it.
So look, he definitely kind of... It's at the forefront of a lot of, like you said, filmmakers, artists and stuff have definitely drawn heavily from the imagery that's been played in this film.
Yeah.
And so this is where he is. Yeah, this is the point where he comes to the newsstand, and there's all this printed material on the magazines and stuff that say obey, consume, sleep, no independent thought, do not question authority, and stuff like that. And he's kind of looking at these magazines and just kind of in disbelief as he's questioning everything. What's going on? Am I on some kind of massive trip? And then this guy walks up next to him, who's obviously a very kind of upper class kind of guy, suited up, businessman. And he looks around at him, and then he sees this guy basically with this humanoid face, but these big bulging eyes, and the skin's all kind of like motted and falling apart a little bit. And he takes his glasses off and kind of is just staring at this bloke he looks like a normal white male, essentially. Yeah. And I think the guy's like, what the fuck are you looking at, sort of thing to him. Yeah. And he's just really confused, and the guy just kind of ends up getting in the car and driving off. And this is, and the newsstand guy comes up to him and he's like, are you going to buy this or not? And he kind of waves this money around at him, and through the glasses, the money says, this is your God. And if that isn't a massive...
fuck you to America.
Yeah, and capitalism, I don't know what is.
What's funny as well, they also mentioned something earlier on where they're going, the police are telling everyone the media are telling everybody we're all a bunch of commies, and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
That's happening too, so.
Oh, yeah. That's it. That's right.
They're socialists. They're communists.
Oh, too true. So this is all happening, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And he starts looking around him, basically, and there's a lot of these kind of humanoid kind of alien creatures that are around. They generally seem to be wearing like the expensive clothes, which is again the nod to the fact that a lot of the social elite that happen to be these kind of creatures. He then ends up going into a grocery store and he starts. There's this great bit where he just insults this woman. And he goes, "I can see you. You're one ugly something or other." And she's like, really. And then I think this is the point where she. Oh yeah, that's right. She then gets the wristwatch thing, which is a Rolex as well. All these things are Rolexes, which is again in the 80s was a sign of rich. If you had a Rolex, you were rich, basically.
Yeah.
And so they use this as a. At this point, all we know is that it's a telecommunication device. It is a bit more than that, but we'll get to that in a sec. And she basically says, I've got one here that can see or something. Yeah. And so then he basically kind of gets out of there. And this is where he gets cornered by the police. There's a couple of policemen, and they are both equally of the of this race, alien race. So they're saying basically they're infiltrated everywhere. Can't trust anyone. Concept, and realizing that he's probably gonna, everything's a bit fucked. He manages to fight his way out. This is where we start seeing Piper do some of his wrestling skills, and he kind of knocks the guys out. And he grabs the gun. It's a shotgun, and I think he kind of thinks, well, I've got nothing to fucking lose. So he walks into a bank, and there's a few of the tellers there that are the alien creatures. There's a security guard there. I don't know.
I'm going, this is obviously an accident that he's just sort of stumbled into a bank.
Yeah.
And then at some stage you must have turned around and go, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of shit already, but armed robbery and
yeah. Yeah. It wasn't probably the best place to walk into. But we do get one of the most famous lines in cinema history that comes out of this.
Yeah.
Where he says, I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. And it's been used so many times since, and I think even like Bad Boys kind of did a nod to it with the whole Skittles scene, that where they hold the place up. So
and it's such an Ash line as well, isn't it?
Totally, yeah, 100%.
Almost a nod because it's got like I've expected him to say groovy.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of the movie, those two, there's a couple of lines that he does in the bank that kind of just a bit not in keeping with the rest of his character.
Yeah,
like he's never really that cool throughout the rest of it.
No, he's not. That's true. That's true.
For some reason, he's got these two like really fucking great lines.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall this. I remember Carpenter did talk about that, and I forget it now. So, but it was something along the lines of that he said it's something exactly along those lines, that he knew that it wasn't quite in keeping with the character, but he just felt like he needed to speak that in that moment in time, that this kind of real moment piece.
Bravado.
It was, and it was a big nod to like John Wayne bravado stuff and Western stuff as well. And I think that's why he kept that in, like the whole, get off your arse and drink some milk moment. It's that kind of, and I think maybe that's what he was toying with, and maybe that's why it doesn't sit with the Nada character. Yeah. So anyway, so he's in the bank. He shoots up a load of people, like alien people. I have to stress, he doesn't ever kill actual humans. And then he kind of manages to kind of make a run for it out the back. And this is where he comes across another policeman, but this policeman is actually human. And so he basically says, beat it. And I remembered again in the commentary afterwards, I don't think it was Carpenter that said it. I want to say it was the producer. And she was saying how we couldn't just have all the police be the aliens. There had to be some that weren't. So that was their way of just kind of having that one moment where you see a normal policeman, and then and that's why he says beat it, and lets him go. Oh no, there's this one point, sorry, I missed a bit, in the bank where we actually see one of the aliens speaking to the wristwatch, and then he suddenly disappears, he's like vanishes, and he's like, well, that's a bit weird. How's that? What just happened there? Oh, that's right. He jumps into the back of this car in the parking garage, and there's this rich woman who he forces into her car. This woman's Meg Foster, by the way, who for me was Evil Lynn in Masters of the Universe. Which is a bad thing to remember her from, but that's what I remember her from. She's been a lot of things. She's just got one of those faces, like her eyes in particular, like this piercing blue eyes that she has. But yeah, she's been in a lot of things since then. So he then, he kind of gets her to go in the car, and he's like, he's completely exhausted. I think this is one of the first moments where he takes the glasses off, and he's just like, man, these glasses are killer. But he ends up, she goes, where do you want me to go? And he's like, back to your house. He goes, I'd rather not. He says, that's not an option. They end up back at her house, and then he takes the glasses off again, has a rest. And that's where he says, wearing these glasses makes you high, but you come down hard. And that's what we were talking about earlier. And he's trying, though, to convince her that, the character's name is Holly. And he's like trying to convince her that what's going on, but she's not really buying it. She just thinks he's a bit off his head, which you would if somebody's basically saying, there's an alien race all around us, and we're blind to all these things. And just the point where he lets his guard down. There's a point. Sorry, just before that, she does slip that she's an executive at a local TV station, and that's when he puts on the TV set and to distract him, and then in doing so, she pushes him through her window, and he just falls down this massive slope. It's an epic fall, like the Hollywood Hills. I don't know, like people are aware of it, but they're fucking big hills, and most of these houses are put on big stilts as well, so they're like quite high up in order to support them on these hills. And he just plummets off this thing, and you just think, any dude would just fucking break their neck if they were.
I was sitting there watching it at the same time, and she just basically just said, she just gasped out loud as soon as he just went out of that window. She was like, oh my God.
It's like, oh shit, no, my glass.
It was fucking epic.
It was a big drop.
It reminds me of was it Mr. The Nice Guys? Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. He falls off over the balcony and ends up like down the hill.
That's right. But somehow he survives. But he's lost his sunglasses because they fell up inside the house as he fell out. So now, and Holly then calls the police on him. So now he's kind of on the run again. He manages to hold up somewhere, and the next morning he sneaks back to the construction site, and where we meet Frank again. So again, Frank, Keith David's character. And he's just like, you're fucking nuts. Leave me alone. I've got a family. I don't need this bullshit. And this is a good thing about Frank's character. Is like he's somebody he's just happy to just keep coasting on. Like he doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to get involved with things. But somehow, without despite that, he ends up getting involved with things. It's his destiny to help Nada out. So he's like, no, I don't want this bullshit. You just leave me alone. And Nada's trying to explain to him, no, you've got to realize there's stuff going on here. And Nada then returns to this alley where he dumps the garbage, the sunglasses in the garbage bin. And of course, there's a big garbage truck that is. That's right. So he. He climbs in, but here's the thing: like he climbs in to kind of find the box, and he does. He finds the box, and he grabs it. But they then. Maybe that's okay. This might be an irrelevant thing, but I was just suddenly like, because as it drives off, it tips everything out. And I've just thought, wouldn't they have been aware that they've just accidentally dumped a whole load of stuff?
I've worked as a cleaner.
Yeah.
I've worked on the back of garbage trucks, and they closed up the doors.
Yeah.
Then he thinking the doors were closed, he tilted the truck.
Yeah.
So why would they tilt the truck back?
I know that was the bit I didn't get. I was just like, because like you would just drive off, yeah? You wouldn't like you.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know they had to somehow get him out of the
if you
truck.
try to compress the rubbish or something,
Yeah.
you tilt it forward.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you got all the shit at the back at the entrance.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And then you've got this empty void at the back at the
yeah.
I
I love the fact that we're kind of like quipping this like one minor thing, but to me it bugged me. It was the one thing that bugged me. I was like, that doesn't.
It's not logical.
It's not logical, man. Anyway,
in the Garbo world.
That's right. So anyway, Lucky. So he ends up getting dumped back out into the alleyway with the box, and this is where Frank turns up again. He's obviously followed him for some reason, and then we get this whole sequence. This full-on fight sequence.
The sequence that my wife turned around and said, "Why are they still fighting?" It's like, just put the fucking sunglasses on.
Yeah, it gets comical, but deliberately so. Like it's meant to be that way, right? So it's like the whole, it reminded me again of we're using Simpsons, but the rake scene in The Simpsons, where he keeps treading on a rake and hitting himself in the. I'm talking about Sideshow Bob. Keeps hitting himself in the face, and you're just like, just the point where you think, okay, that's not funny anymore, and it feels like it's not funny, but they keep pushing it, and it becomes funny again. That's kind of what we're getting here. Like it's ridiculously long.
And you know what? The Family Guy copied this as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did the fight with the chicken suit guy. Dad had a massive fight, and it just goes throughout the whole town, and then it goes for ages, like half an episode, and then they suddenly wake up and they're in the apocalypse, like it's the end of the world or something. It's like many years later. Still hating each other.
Nice.
This never-ending fight happens.
It's so cool. I mean, obviously, when I first watched it, I thought, I'm talking about the very first time I watched it, I just thought, well, it's because it's Roddy Piper, yeah? Like, he has to have a fight scene in it.
Yeah.
And I did remember thinking it was a bit ridiculous, but I really liked it this time round. I loved the energy of it. I like the way the exchange. I love the bit where Piper takes a swipe at him with this stick, and it smashes the car window, and he kind of looks and he just bursts out laughing before they start fucking fighting again. And I just love that. I just love the way it rocks. And a lot of that comes back down to the choreographer that I was saying again, the Tyler guy, because he kind of said he wanted that rhythm to it, that it has these, because they are mates. They're mates. They do actually like each other. That's the thing. And they just pummel the shit out of each other. And they don't really want to hurt each other. And I think that pocket of where, like I said, where he smashes the window, it's this moment of like, fuck, that could have been your head. And it's like, and it breaks them out of it for a moment before they like, oh shit, no, I'm still pissed at you. So they go back into the fight again. And I read as well, or it was in, maybe it was Carpenter's kind of comments about, again, this was a deliberate nod to the Western brawls, and that he wanted that energy, like, where it just feels raw, and it, and it is, it's a physical fight that's going on, and it's not always. He said, he was tired of seeing fights in movies where it's over really quickly and the hero, does a, quick jab and it's all done. He wanted it to feel like it was actually an effort for Nada to be able to get this guy to wear the fucking sunglasses.
Look, I remember the first time I saw it, I think I went for a wave of emotions of of, oh my God, they're having a fight. Oh, well, obviously, because he doesn't want to put sunglasses on. And about halfway through, I went, this is going on quite long.
Yes.
It's like, and about 2/3 of the way through, I went, you know what? They're taking the piss here.
yeah, they really are.
And I'm going to ride with this. This is quite fun.
yeah. I think it is. It's like, how long can you push something out for before it becomes too uncomfortable? Because you ride that. It's like I said, that's why I mentioned the rate thing, because it is. It's like you get to that point where you're like, oh yeah, I've had enough now. Just put the fucking sunglasses on, and it keeps going. And then you're like, oh, that was actually pretty cool. And then you're still riding along with it again, and get sucked back in again. But yeah, look, it's a good moment. It's probably one of the moments that it's most known for, other than all the synonymous kind of images that crop up. And eventually, like, obviously, Nada then manages to get Frank, and he puts the sunglasses on him, and that's where he sees all these kind of aliens around him. And there's a line, I think Nada says, "Partner, life's a bitch, and this one's in heat." And yeah, so that's what. But then they get clocked, and so they have to do a bit of a runner. And that's when they end up back at this. They kind of try and their plan is to try and find the group again from the church, and they manage to locate them again, and they end up at this kind of meeting place. It's in this kind of local community center, and again, it's that lead guy again that's running it, and a few of the other faces that we met from before. And they're having like this seminar in the background, and they've got all these radical ideas. They don't need to wear the sunglasses anymore. This was a big shift away from that. They could wear these contact lenses, and it's like an upgrade, so they don't cause the headaches. And it means that it's actually a very good story device, because it means they can kind of stop having to go through the rigmarole of fighting each other for 5 minutes and beyond to wear sunglasses, and just get on with the action. And this is where we get a bit more kind of background that these aliens are increasing carbon dioxide and methane emissions because it's more suitable for their atmosphere and things like that. So, and they're kind of using up their planet's resources in the process. We then get Holly returning again, so Meg Foster's character crops up, and she's now out of the blue. Then you're kind of like, how did you find out about this place? Which is a bit sus. And she's claiming that she believes Nada now, and then she kind of gives them some information about a location to where the aliens are broadcasting these subliminal messages. It's during this meeting though that they realize, oh yeah, that's right, and they find out that it's being held at coming out of a signal being sent out on television. And, lo and behold, obviously, Meg Foster's character works for the television. So they think there might be a way that they can kind of try and get in there and do something to kind of break the signal. If they kind of shut down the signal. Sometimes, like, this reminds me of The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a kind of same concept. They realize if they knock out the main kind of power source, then they can kind of get the truth out there. And that was a 1988 or 87 film as well, from memory. So there's obviously a bit of a common theme running at the time of the late 80s. Anyway, so that's the kind of plan. They want to be able to do that. But all of a sudden, as they're talking, they get raided by the police, who are basically coming in and they're just killing everyone left, right, center, blasting people away, including the lead guy, that's been running the resistance movement. And Frank and Nada basically kind of try and kind of hightail it out of there again. And they've got a few guns on them. They're shooting. They end up in this kind of alleyway. And you're just thinking, how the fuck are you going to get out of there? And then and they're cornered. And you're thinking they're not going to be able to get out. They're stuck. And this is the point where we find out the true meaning about the wristwatch. Because I think Frank's the one that's got it on, and it malfunctions and it opens up this portal. And they realize that's their way out, so they jump down into it, and it takes them into this alley, this underground passage. Sorry, under the city. So look, anyway, so they end up in this underground passage under the city, and they have no idea where this goes, and they just kind of like follow it along for a while. And they end up, it's this weird moment because they end up suddenly in this kind of building where there's all these kind of social elite people having this kind of rich party, like having this party. Yeah, and they've got a few human collaborators on board, so it's kind of like all these aliens are like welcome them on board, and you know, it's like, you know, if you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. So like basically, like if you become part of us and help us, we will give you money so you can live profitably. And that's what they kind of stumbled into, and like everyone's wearing these suits and stuff, and like, you know, and Nada's still in his like lumberjack shirt or whatever it is, and they look so out of place.
Party, like nobody's really an eyelids at the moment. It's like two smelly guys in smelly homeless places. We've not seen them shower.
No,
so they're clearly like, and they've been living rough on the street. So they're smelly people just wandering through this party.
I know, and they don't even look at them. And I was like, yeah, that's a bit odd. They just kind of randomly walk through. And this is where they meet that one of the guys from the shanty town, who was one of the homeless drifters, and he is wearing a tuxedo now, and he's all kind of dolled up, and he's basically one of the human collaborators. And he's like, "Oh, you've joined us as well. Let me show you around this place." And he's like then walking around with them, and he's kind of giving the background of what's going on. I think there's a point where he shows them this teleportation place where you see them kind of like disappearing off. It's like the one real sci-fi, like uber sci-fi moment, where you see these people kind of almost getting on like this, well, for want of a better word, you know, like the Star Trek kind of thing where they beam up and beam down kind of moment. And we see that kind of happening anyway. And then he continues their journey. And they end up at the local TV station, Cable 54, which, you know, it just so happens is the source of the alien signal. And this is where Nada and Frank realize that this is probably their chance to try and do something. So they pull out the pistols and they start shooting people. The drifted guy then teleports himself out, and this is what sounds the alarm. And so they realize, they're fucked. They've got to just try and get up there now and just do it themselves and knock out the signal, essentially. And as they're kind of arming themselves up with rifles, and they think, right, we've got to get to the roof of the building. On their way up, they know this potentially is a suicide mission, essentially. But they bump into Holly again, who works at the station, and they're kind of between the three of them. They are then kind of trying to make their way up the stairway.
Which is major stuff, because she suddenly disappears from the meeting where everybody gets gunned down. Yeah, but suddenly she's back at work.
Back at work, like nothing's changed. Yeah,
exactly. Major stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And so
I don't mean the two guys are too smart though. So
no, maybe not so much. So they're making their way up to the roof, and Nada's kind of like leading the way. He kind of leaves Holly and Frank behind, and then suddenly Holly comes up, pulls a gun against Frank's temple, and we don't see him get shot, but you hear the shot.
Yeah,
killing him. And so it's the point where you realize, oh fuck. So hold on. And I had this moment, like, and I'm not gonna. I know we've still got to give the reveal away at the end. I had this moment, like, when I rewatched it recently, I was just like, I had it in my head that I thought she was one of the aliens, but she's just a human conspirator, right? She's
you know what? I think you're mixed up with V.
Yeah,
she's not like Jane Butler.
That's right.
So she's got the same eyes, those striking eyes. And I had the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, it's not Jane Butler, it's Meg Foster.
Yeah. No, you're actually right on it. That's what I was about to say. And I think I had confused pockets of this with V. Because there are similarities, obviously, like V's, they're reptilians that live under the, that have come up to rise up against the human race.
And then combine them both, and you've got David Icke's wet dream, basically.
Nice, yeah.
Aliens that have infiltrated and controlling us all.
Pretty much. Yes.
And it's just completely warped his mind.
That's cool. So that anyway. So where was I going with that? So so Holly kills Frank essentially, and then we have Nada up on the roof on his own. We start getting the police the helicopter circling around him, and he gets up to the big satellite dish essentially, and he calls out and says, "Hey Frank, Holly, are you with me?" And then I think Holly says, "I'm here," or something and that's where he realizes, shit, you're one of them. Fuck. Moment. And things start clocking with him. He realizes that's why the police are suddenly turning up really quickly. Like she's been in on it all along. And he realizes at this point, this point where he's dead no matter what, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to live this. So he basically kind of pulls out a pistol that he has hidden, and he kills Holly, turns his back on the antenna, and there's this, I think the police marksmen up ahead, they're all calling out to him, put the gun down on stuff.
Yeah.
And he basically takes his final shot, shoots and destroys the antenna as his last act.
In
and he
spectacular fashion.
Yeah, that's right. And then the sniper dude on the helicopter shoots him.
Yeah.
And he kind of falls to the ground, and he basically, there's this moment where he just gives the helicopter the finger as his last defiant act. And then obviously like the satellite's destroyed, so the signal gets broken down. And then with that, everyone around LA is suddenly realizing, and the rest of the country are realizing, oh shit, there's aliens in amongst them. And we get all these kind of like funny moments where the newscasters, for example, are both aliens that were there, and they're kind of, everyone's suddenly seen them for who they are, and they're like, what's going on? And there's this great moment in the bar where everyone's watching the stuff, and there's this dude that's just an alien who's just carrying on watching the TV as if like nothing's happened, and they're all kind of looking at him going,
he's like, no idea.
Yeah. And then we get this great end moment where there's the one moment we've got the breasts exposed of this chick riding on top of this guy, and then she looks down and it's an alien, and he goes, "What's the matter?" or whatever he says. Before we end, that's it, and that's the end of the film. We bow out. So so look, some great moments, and obviously like I guess the key thing before we kind of start like discussing our final thoughts on this and our recommendations is maybe just a comment on Nada's sacrifice. It's almost reminiscent of, I kind of feel like, Gene Hackman in the Poseidon Adventure, where he's been the hero all along, and he realizes like they're not going to escape this thing unless he jumps in that film. He jumps out and he has to hold the vent, which means he has to basically burn himself from the steam in order to let the others survive. It's like the hero has to sacrifice himself. Do you think that was that had to happen in this film? Do you think that was a good choice to go there?
I think they were also get a bit highbrow here, copying Vonnegut's Harrison Bergeron as well. Where he sort of goes on TV and exposes the world for what it is. Yeah. Only to know, like he really knows that he's going to be lobotomized straight afterwards.
Yeah, that's right.
He's got nothing to lose. He's got to get his voice out there.
Yeah, true.
I mean, this rings true with a lot of sort of the archetype sort of traditional storytelling is, especially in tragedies, is they just go, they're driven to the end of their journey, and no matter what happens, they don't expect the best to happen, but they don't expect the worst. So they just go along with it and see, whatever happens, basically.
Yeah,
so, which is like, Pentheus in the Bacchae went along and didn't know where he was going. But he had a journey to go on, and it all went to shit, and all the rest of the Greek tragedies as well. So
that's true. Yeah,
it's a textbook tragedy, but that's a good thing about this movie as well, is that it uses the Western, it uses the ancient sort of storytelling techniques of a traditional tragedy and it's got all these other different things, sci-fi. It's got all these extra elements in it that you just kind of, it's so underlying the surface, and it's a great fun movie as well. So it's
yeah.
But yeah,
In many ways, I think that's the thing, and that's what's quite clever about this is the film, and maybe that's why it still resonates and why coming back full circle, why it's relevant still, because it does use those kind of old stories that like the Greek kind of tragedies that you were talking about, and fits it within a modern storytelling context. And in many ways, if we just look at John Carpenter's stories, this is almost like the next step beyond Big Trouble in Little China with Jack Burton's character, because and there is a bit of a similarity in the sense that both Jack Burton and Nada are these everyday kind of average guys who find themselves in the middle of a crazy situation.
Yeah, exactly.
And the only difference, and why I say it's the next step on, is because in Nada's case, he takes the ultimate sacrifice of having to sacrifice himself in order for the greater good. Excuse me. So it's kind of interesting with that journey that's taken when you kind of look at that, and it is very much Carpenter's films. If you look at Carpenter's films, a lot of that is about that. It's this kind of everyday kind of guy who's, as I said, Snake Plissken's a good example of that.
Laurie Strode, she's just a babysitter.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So it's often like, and that's part of its appeal. The reason I'm mentioning it is part of its appeal. It needs to be somebody that the audience can connect with, and the only way they're going to do that is if they do come across as your average person. It could be anybody in that situation. And Carpenter himself said, he often he wrote it like that. He wanted to, he's basically writing himself as Nada. He's an average guy that's just in this situation, and that's that is what connects with the audience and brings them into that world. And the sci-fi element is obviously a huge factor too, because, and that comes back to what we were saying as well about how science fiction now has become quite relevant. Like these stuff that was filmed way back when, that was meant to be like far-fetched and unbelievable, is starting to kind of have significant effect in what was considered a dystopian future. Has elements of that have come to be true. And
the thing about good sci-fi is it has always shone. It's always held a mirror up to society as it is.
Yeah,
and it's always been about sort of trying to take down. I mean, you look at your Brave New Worlds and your 1984s and all that sort of thing. It's always about telling something. You using sci-fi, using the genre, and you're using a story to portray, like to convey a message, basically, and an actual sort of a ripping apart of what's going on around them, basically.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, it's why Black Mirror has done so well as a series. It's done exactly that, and obviously now in a bit more modern context. But jumping ahead, using kind of these futuristic concepts, but grounding it in reality, because these things do feel believable. And who knows, down the track, we could easily see humans walking down any of those stories that's been used within those episodes.
Oh, we do all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it comes back to the relevance of this film, and I think I have to stress again, if you haven't seen it, I think you kind of need to see it to realize how relevant it is today. And I know we kind of were hinting at that beforehand, but we do end up kind of saying, our recommendations of it. And personally, I think, yes, it's a bloody good film. And like I said, when I put it on, I wanted to rewatch it straight away. I wanted to go down that journey again and really experience it. And I think that says a lot for a film to want to do that almost straight away.
Yeah.
So not only do I love it,
the relevance of now. Like if I'd watched it 5 years ago, I would have gone, this is a fun film.
Yeah,
a great sci-fi. But watching it now, it's almost like, holy shit, this is so fucking dead on.
Yeah.
And it's so like important for people to watch something like this.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like look, we're kind of saying that we would 100% recommend this. Yeah.
Oh yes, easily.
Yeah. So and that's the other thing I was going to say is like, so when we look at John Carpenter's work up till now, like he's had so many, like this was like he was in his peak, right? He was making so many good movies from like, you know, the early 70s right up to when They Live comes out, which was like 1988. And it was the last film he would do for the 80s. And the next movie that would come out, and we've already done a podcast on this, but because I kind of just moved stuff around a little bit, but would be Memoirs of an Invisible Man. And that was in like 91, I want to say. So there was about a 3-year gap between this and that one. And for me, Memoirs was his first real trip up. Yeah, and I think this is the one. Memoirs was the one movie that it was his first misfire. It's not good. Like we watched it back, listen to the podcast and hear us talk about it. It's not a great film.
No.
But like if you look at everything leading up to that, so just to recap, for you know, if you haven't, like, go check out the podcast because we already talked about them, but go check them out. But like, you know, hit was Dark Star, his collaboration with Dan O'Bannon, but then his proper film on his own was Assault on Precinct 13, followed by Halloween. There was a couple of TV movies he did in there, including Elvis as one of them. But then he'd do The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Christine, Starman, Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, and They Live. And all of them have become classics, cult classics in their own right. And it just felt like he you know, you look back at these films and they still hold up, and this one's definitely one of them. And it's almost like this film is...
Those films were big films at the time as well. Like Halloween and Halloween and all. They would say that they were little films, but they were actually massive films at the time. Box office sensation.
Yeah.
They Live. You know, as I said earlier, I don't think they ever released it in the cinema in Australia. I don't know whether it was like that in the UK, but straight to DVD.
I can't remember, which is really weird because I've got no memory of it coming out. I've got memories of it. I like you. I worked in a video store, and now I think that's when I would have watched it because I was just churning through that stuff when I was. Well, you know,
it was a bit of a throwaway title. Like, I think it was New Line released it, and it was just chucked out with a whole bunch of others. Just another horror film. Yeah, but it was just, there's so much more to it. I put it in as one of his best films of his career.
I agree. Actually, yeah, I 100%. And I was literally just about to say, to me, I feel like this is probably when he was right at that kind of top of his peak, and everything after this film is not. It just doesn't quite. He never reached the potential of this. I'd argue that In the Mouth of Madness, which comes after Memoirs, is an exception, and I would probably say In the Mouth of Madness is his last great film that he did. But we'll come to that. But I feel like, as much as I love In the Mouth of Madness, I feel like They Live has the appeal factor of this was just that little bit more. And I think from here on in, he never really produced the magic. And so, which is why if you look back at his film career, it was the 80s that he was just on fire, man. Like he was just churning this stuff out, and it felt like he could do
the this film as well was when it was released on VHS, and I remember the copy looked dodgy.
Yeah,
you know. And then I rewatched it today. When I rewatched it today, I watched a restored Blu-ray version. And
same. Yeah,
photography beautiful.
It's lovely. It's shot. So good.
But it was lost in translation on VHS.
Yeah, I agree.
And it looked like a cheap, LA Law type thing. You know, it looked like film video or whatever they shot on 1 inch. Whatever they shot.
Yeah.
On back there. But yeah, I don't know. I think if people watched it today, they'd get more out of it today than
I think so. Well, it's definitely not aged, and I think that's part of its appeal as well. Like it just sings, man. And I loved it all the more for rewatching it again. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think on that note, we're saying we highly recommend it. If you haven't caught this film, definitely go check it out.
It's probably been the most glowing sort of podcast that we've done of any film whatsoever.
I think so. There's been a lot of surprise ones where we along the way where we've gone, oh yeah, I remember that, and you rewatch and go, oh, that was actually better than I thought it was. Moments. And there's others that have that nostalgic appeal to it, which we carry through, which this did a little bit. But I think, like I said, like this is the first time when I rewatched something, I was just like, man, I could just easily live that journey all over.
I was just looking at IMDb reviews, and there's some really kind of like up to date ones. Like people are posting today, and
sure.
They're saying everybody should see this. This is more relevant than ever, and So I really think that people are rediscovering it again.
I really think they are too, and I'm hoping this this podcast, it is just timely the way we're releasing this. Like it wasn't by any stretch that we deliberately planned this out. We'd always intended to do the Carpenter run, but it just seems like this is going to sit right. So if you are listening to this, or you stumble across our podcast and want to have a listen to it, and yes, there's spoilers in the mix, which is always the way, but watch it and let us know your thoughts. Like, are you agreeing with us? Do you think it deserves this resurgence? Because we definitely think it does. And it'd be interesting to hear like those that haven't discovered it yet, your take on it. So do kind of write out to our usual social platforms on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Let us know your thoughts. Until then, we'll keep cruising along with the Carpenter truck that we're journeying on, and our next one will be In the Mouth of Madness. So do kind of come back and listen to us as we dissect and discuss that one and the other movies that go beyond into the latter years of his film. Until then, I'm your host, Saul Muerte, as always, then the lead surgeon of the podcast. And I'd like to extend my thanks to my colleague, Miles Davies, for joining me on this one.
Thanks for having me.
Until then, goodbye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.